The transport ship shook as another blast hit its side. Captain Jake Morrison gripped his rifle tighter and looked at his team. They were only 5 soldiers against an entire alien fleet, but they had to try. Somewhere on the planet below, human families were trapped and waiting for rescue. "Sir, we're going down," shouted Lieutenant Kate Miller from the pilot seat. "I can't keep us in the air much longer." Jake looked out the window at the red desert planet. Huge alien ships filled the sky like metal birds of prey. They were shaped like crystals and shined in the sunlight. These were Zephyrian ships, and the Zephyrians were not known for showing mercy. "Get us down fast," Jake ordered. "We need to reach the colony before they do." The ship crashed into the sand with a loud bang. Jake's head hit the wall hard, and he tasted blood in his mouth. When he opened his eyes, smoke filled the cabin. He could hear alien voices getting closer. "Everyone out," he yelled, but only Kate responded. The other 3 soldiers were not moving. Jake checked them quickly. 2 were dead, and 1 was badly hurt. Kate helped him carry the wounded soldier out of the crashed ship. They ran toward some rocks that would give them cover. Behind them, the alien voices grew louder. Jake could hear their heavy footsteps in the sand. The Zephyrians were 8 feet tall and looked like they were made of crystal and metal. Their skin was hard like armor, and their eyes glowed blue. They moved fast for creatures so big. Jake had fought them before and knew how dangerous they were. "This way," Kate whispered, pointing to a cave in the rocks. They carried their wounded friend inside and set him down gently. The soldier's breathing was weak and his eyes were closed. "We can't help him here," Jake said quietly. "We need medical supplies." They could hear the aliens searching outside. Their language sounded like breaking glass mixed with thunder. Jake knew they would find the cave soon. He looked around for another way out, but there was none. "Sir," Kate said, "maybe we should surrender. They might keep us alive if we don't fight." Jake shook his head. "You know what they do to prisoners. They put them in their fighting arenas for sport. I won't let that happen to you." But even as he spoke, alien soldiers appeared at the cave entrance. Their weapons glowed with blue energy, and their crystal faces showed no emotion. Jake raised his rifle, but he knew it was useless. Human weapons barely scratched Zephyrian armor. "Drop your weapons," one of them said in broken English. "You come with us now." Jake looked at Kate, then at their dying friend. There was no choice. He put down his rifle and raised his hands. Kate did the same, tears running down her face. The aliens tied their hands with metal cords that felt cold against their skin. They dragged them out of the cave and toward their ships. Jake saw the human colony in the distance. Smoke rose from burning buildings. He had failed to save them. They were pushed into a dark prison cell on one of the alien ships. The walls were made of the same crystal material as the aliens themselves. Strange lights moved inside the walls like trapped lightning. Hours passed. Jake and Kate sat in silence, listening to the ship's engines. Finally, Kate spoke. "Where do you think they're taking us?" Jake had heard stories from other soldiers who had escaped from Zephyrian capture. Probably to one of their arena worlds. They like to watch other species fight for their entertainment. Kate's face went pale. "Fight what?" "Each other. Wild animals. Sometimes their own warriors." Jake tried to sound calm, but his heart was beating fast. He had seen videos of Zephyrian arenas. Very few prisoners ever came out alive. The ship door opened with a hiss. 2 guards entered and grabbed Jake. They were even bigger than the soldiers who had captured him. Their crystal armor was decorated with strange symbols. "You come now," one said. "Arena Master wants to see you." They dragged him through the ship's corridors. Other prisoners watched from behind metal bars. Jake saw humans, but also aliens he didn't recognize. All of them looked scared and hopeless. The Arena Master was waiting in a large room. He was the biggest Zephyrian Jake had ever seen, with silver crystals growing from his shoulders like spikes. His eyes glowed brighter than the others, and when he smiled, Jake could see rows of sharp teeth. "So this is the human captain," the Arena Master said. His voice was deep and made the walls shake. "I am Thax. You will fight in my arena." Jake stood straight and looked directly at the alien. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Corps. I demand you treat us according to the Galactic War Convention." Thax laughed, a sound like breaking stone. "Your human laws mean nothing here. You are now property of the Zephyrian Empire. In 3 days you will face our champion in combat. If you survive, you may live a little longer. If not..." He shrugged his massive shoulders. "What about my soldier? The female? She will work in the prison levels. Do not worry about her. Worry about yourself. Gorvek the Destroyer has never lost a fight. He has killed warriors from 50 different worlds. Guards took Jake to another cell, smaller and darker than the first. As the door closed, he heard Thax's laughter echoing down the corridor. Jake sat on the cold floor and put his head in his hands. In 3 days, he would face a creature that had never been defeated. His chances of survival were almost zero. But Jake had never given up before, and he wouldn't start now. Somehow he would find a way to win. He had to. Kate's life might depend on it, and so might the lives of every human prisoner in this terrible place. Jake woke up when cold water hit his face. A guard was standing outside his cell with an empty bucket. The alien pointed to a small bowl of gray food that had been pushed through a slot in the door. "Eat," the guard said. "You need strength for training." "Training?" Jake picked up the bowl and smelled the food. It looked like wet sand but smelled like meat. He was hungry enough to eat anything, so he forced it down. It tasted better than it looked. After eating, guards came to take him to a large room filled with weapons and training equipment. Other prisoners were already there, practicing with swords and spears. Most of them were aliens Jake had never seen before. They all looked strong and dangerous. "New fighter," called out a creature that looked like a giant lizard. "What world you from?" "Earth," Jake replied. The lizard creature laughed. "Earth? Never heard of it. Must be very small world if you're their best warrior." Jake didn't answer. He walked over to examine the weapons. Most were too big for human hands, but he found a metal staff that felt right. He began practicing moves he had learned in military training. An hour later, a new person entered the training room. This one was clearly Zephyrian, but different from the others Jake had seen. She was smaller, maybe only 7 feet tall, and her crystal skin was lighter in color. She carried a bag of medical supplies. "Time for health check," she announced. Her voice was softer than other Zephyrians, almost musical. The prisoners lined up and she examined each one. When Jake's turn came, she looked at him with curiosity. Her blue eyes seemed more alive than those of other Zephyrians. "Human," she said quietly. "I have never treated a human before. May I see your hands?" Jake held out his hands. She touched them gently, studying his skin and fingers. Her own hands were warm, not cold like he expected. "Interesting," she said. "Your bones are less dense than ours, but your muscles are more flexible. This could be useful in combat." "Are you a doctor?" Jake asked. "I am Lyra. I heal fighters who get hurt in practice. My job is to keep you alive until Arena Day." She paused, then added more quietly, "I also try to help them survive the fights." She cleaned a cut on Jake's arm that he got from the crashed ship. Her touch was gentle and careful. "Tell me about this Gorvek," Jake said. "What fighting style does he use?" Lyra looked around to make sure no guards were listening. "I should not tell you this, but Gorvek is very strong and very fast. He likes to grab his enemies and crush them. Most fighters try to meet his strength with strength, but that never works." "What would work?" She was quiet for a long moment. "You think differently than other fighters I have met. Perhaps that is good. Gorvek expects his enemies to fight like Zephyrians. Maybe a human way of fighting would surprise him." Over the next 2 days, Lyra visited Jake several times. Each time she gave him small pieces of advice. She told him about Gorvek's favorite attacks and his habits in the arena. She also brought him better food and medicine that helped his cuts heal faster. "Why are you helping me?" Jake asked during one of her visits. Lyra sat down next to him in his cell. For the first time, she looked sad instead of just professional. "I had a brother once," she said. "His name was Crix. He was a soldier in our army. 3 years ago, he died fighting against a species called the Valorians. We were told they were evil creatures who wanted to destroy us." She paused and looked at her hands. "Later, I learned the truth. The Valorians were just defending their home world. We attacked them first. My brother died for a lie, and an entire peaceful species was wiped out." Jake saw tears in her crystal eyes. He had not known that Zephyrians could cry. "I cannot bring back my brother or the Valorians," she continued. "But maybe I can help one innocent person survive this terrible place." "I'm not innocent," Jake said. "I'm a soldier. I've killed people in war. But you came here to save others, not to conquer them. That makes you different from most warriors in this arena." On his last day of training, Jake watched other fighters practice. He noticed that they all fought the same way, with power and aggression. They tried to be stronger and faster than their opponents. But Jake was not stronger or faster than Gorvek. He needed a different approach. That night, Lyra brought him a special meal. Real meat and fresh water instead of the usual gray paste. Tomorrow you fight, she said. I have watched Gorvek for 2 years. He has killed 47 opponents. But I think you might have a chance, and why? Because you do not fight like the others. You watch and think before you act. You use your mind as much as your body. Gorvek has never faced anyone like that. She handed him a small device that looked like a metal coin. What's this? Emergency medical injector. If you are badly hurt, press it against your skin. It will help with pain and bleeding. But use it only if you really need it. There is only one dose. Jake looked at the device, then at Lyra. Why are you really doing this? There has to be more than just your brother. Lyra smiled sadly. Because I have been watching you train, and I see something that we Zephyrians have forgotten. You never give up even when things seem impossible. You find new ways to solve problems. You protect others even when it puts you in danger. These are things my people used to value, before we became obsessed with being the strongest in the galaxy. She stood up to leave, then turned back. Jake Morrison of Earth, tomorrow you will face our greatest champion. But remember this, strength is not just about how hard you can hit. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to keep fighting when everyone expects you to fall. After she left, Jake lay on his cell floor and thought about her words. In less than 12 hours, he would step into an arena where 47 other fighters had died. But for the first time since his capture, he felt hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to win. He closed his eyes and began planning his strategy. Tomorrow, he would show the Zephyrians what human determination really looked like. The arena was bigger than Jake had imagined. Thousands of Zephyrians filled the seats, their crystal bodies catching the light like a field of diamonds. They were all here to watch him die. Jake stood in a metal cage that would lift him up to the fighting floor. His heart was beating fast, but his mind was calm. He had spent the morning going over his plan again and again. It was risky, but it was his only chance. The cage rose up through the floor with a loud grinding sound. Bright lights hit Jake's eyes, and the noise from the crowd was like thunder. Zephyrians were pointing at him and making sounds that he guessed were laughter. Across the arena, another cage was rising. Jake got his first look at Gorvek the Destroyer, and his stomach dropped. The champion was even bigger than Arena Master Thax. His crystal armor was black instead of the usual blue, and sharp spikes grew from his arms and shoulders. When Gorvek roared, the sound made Jake's teeth hurt. Arena Master Thax's voice boomed over the crowd noise. Citizens of the Empire, today we have special entertainment. The human calls himself Captain Jake Morrison. He claims to be a warrior, but look at him. So small and weak. The crowd laughed louder. Someone threw a piece of fruit that hit the bars of Jake's cage. Gorvek the Destroyer has never lost a fight, Thax continued. He has killed the strongest warriors from 50 worlds. This human will not last 5 minutes. The cages reached the arena floor and opened. Jake stepped out onto the sandy ground and looked around. The arena was circular, about 100 feet across. The walls were smooth crystal that went up 30 feet to the first row of seats. There was nowhere to hide and nowhere to run. Weapons were scattered around the arena floor. Swords, spears, hammers, and axes. All of them were designed for creatures much larger than humans. Jake picked up a spear, but it was too heavy. He chose a sword instead, though it felt awkward in his hands. Gorvek picked up a massive warhammer that would have taken 3 humans to lift. He swung it around his head like it weighed nothing. The crowd cheered. Ready to die, little human? Gorvek's voice was deep and rough. I will make it quick if you beg. Jake didn't answer. He was studying Gorvek's movements, looking for weaknesses. The champion was incredibly strong and fast, but he was also overconfident. He expected Jake to fight like all his other opponents. A horn sounded and the fight began. Gorvek charged across the arena like a running truck. His warhammer came down where Jake had been standing, but Jake was no longer there. He had rolled to the side at the last second. The hammer hit the ground so hard it made a crater in the sand. The crowd went quiet for a moment. They had expected the fight to end with that first blow. Gorvek swung his hammer in a wide arc, trying to catch Jake as he moved. But Jake ducked under the swing and stabbed with his sword. The blade hit Gorvek's leg but bounced off his crystal skin without leaving a mark. You cannot hurt me, Gorvek laughed. Your weak weapons are useless. Jake knew this already. He wasn't trying to hurt Gorvek yet, he was learning. He spent the next few minutes dodging and studying his opponent's fighting style. Gorvek always swung his hammer the same way. He always took the same step before each attack. He was strong and fast, but he was also predictable. The crowd was getting bored. They wanted to see blood, not dancing around. Some of them started booing. Gorvek was getting angry too. He had expected to crush the human quickly, but Jake kept slipping away from his attacks. The champion's swings became wilder and less controlled. "Stand still and fight," Gorvek roared. This was what Jake had been waiting for. He led Gorvek toward the arena wall, dodging and weaving to avoid the hammer strikes. When they were close enough, Jake suddenly stopped and fell flat on his back. Gorvek's momentum carried him forward. His hammer swing was aimed at where Jake's head had been, but instead it smashed into the crystal wall. The impact was so powerful that cracks appeared in the wall and Gorvek staggered backward. Jake rolled between Gorvek's legs and came up behind him. The champion tried to turn around, but Jake grabbed one of the spikes on Gorvek's back and used it to swing himself up onto the giant's shoulders. Gorvek reached up to grab Jake, but the human was already moving. Jake wrapped his arms around Gorvek's thick neck and held on tight. It was like trying to strangle a tree, but Jake wasn't trying to choke him. He was looking for something else. Behind Gorvek's neck, where the crystal plates of his armor met, Jake found a small gap. It was barely wide enough for his fingers, but it was there. Jake pulled out the small knife he had hidden in his boot and pushed it into the gap. Gorvek screamed and spun around, trying to shake Jake off. But Jake held on and pushed the knife deeper. He could feel it cutting through something soft beneath the crystal armor. The crowd was on its feet now. No one had ever seen their champion in trouble before. Gorvek threw himself backward against the arena wall, trying to crush Jake. The human's back hit the crystal with a loud crack and pain shot through his whole body. But he didn't let go. With his last bit of strength, Jake twisted the knife. Gorvek's scream cut off suddenly, and the giant warrior fell forward onto the sand. Jake rolled away just before Gorvek's massive body hit the ground. The arena went completely silent. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. Jake stood up slowly, his back screaming with pain. He looked down at Gorvek, who was not moving. The great champion was dead. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then one Zephyrian in the crowd started clapping slowly. Others joined in until the whole arena was filled with the sound of applause. Arena Master Thax's voice came over the speakers, but he sounded shocked. The human has won. Gorvek the Destroyer is dead. Jake looked up at the crowd and saw something he didn't expect. Instead of anger, many of the Zephyrians looked impressed. They had never seen anyone defeat their champion using skill instead of strength. In the medical section, Jake saw Lyra watching him. She was smiling and there were tears in her crystal eyes. She looked proud. Guards came to escort Jake back to his cell, but they treated him differently now. They didn't push or drag him. One of them even helped him walk when his injured back made him stumble. As they led him away from the arena, Jake heard the crowd still talking excitedly about the fight. For the first time in years, someone had shown them something new. A human had taught them that there was more than one way to be a warrior. But Jake knew this was just the beginning. Winning the fight had kept him alive, but it had also made him more valuable to the Zephyrians. They would want to see what else he could do. His real challenges were just starting. Still, for now, he was alive. Kate was alive. And somewhere in this crystal prison, there was at least one alien who believed that strength came from more than just size and power. That was something to build on. The medical room was quiet except for the soft hum of alien healing machines. Jake lay on his stomach while Lyra worked on his injured back. Her hands moved carefully over his bruised skin, applying medicine that felt cool and soothing. "You were very lucky," she said softly. "3 of your ribs are cracked and your back muscles are badly damaged. Any other species would be dead." Jake winced as she touched a particularly sore spot. "How long before I can fight again?" "Fight again?" Lyra looked surprised. "Do you want to fight again?" "No, but I don't think they'll give me a choice." Winning against Gorvek probably just made them want to see more. Lyra was quiet for a moment. "You are right. Already there is talk among the arena masters. They want to bring special opponents from other worlds to fight you. Some say you should face 3 opponents at once. Others want to see how you do against wild beasts." Jake closed his eyes. He had hoped that winning would earn him some freedom, but instead it had made him more valuable as entertainment. "There is something else," Lyra continued. "The High Council wants to meet you tomorrow. They have never seen a human before, and your victory has made them curious." The High Council was the group of most powerful Zephyrians who ruled their empire. Jake had heard that they were ancient and incredibly dangerous. If they were interested in him, that could be either very good or very bad. What do they want? I do not know. But I have been ordered to make sure you are healthy enough to appear before them. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. His back hurt too much and his mind was racing with possibilities. Maybe the council would set him free as a reward for entertaining their people. More likely, they would find new ways to use him for their amusement. The next morning, guards came to take him to the council chambers. They gave him clean clothes to wear, simple gray robes that marked him as a prisoner. His hands were chained with metal cuffs, but the guards seemed less hostile than before. Word of his victory had spread through the entire prison complex. The council chambers were enormous. The ceiling was so high that Jake couldn't see the top in the dim light. 12 massive Zephyrians sat in crystal chairs arranged in a circle. Their armor was more elaborate than any Jake had seen, decorated with precious metals and glowing gems. At the center of the circle stood Arena Master Thax. He looked nervous, which was not a good sign. If Thax was worried, Jake should be terrified. Honored Council, Thax began. I present the human warrior who defeated Gorvek the Destroyer. The council members studied Jake like he was an interesting insect. One of them, whose crystal skin was almost white with age, spoke first. So small, she said. How did such a tiny creature kill our champion? He used trickery, said another council member. Gorvek was not prepared for such dishonorable tactics. Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. I used strategy. There's a difference. The ancient council member smiled, showing sharp crystal teeth. It speaks. And it dares to correct us. Interesting. What shall we do with it? Asked another member. It is too dangerous to fight our people again, but too valuable to simply kill. I have a proposal, said Thax. We could auction the human to the highest bidder. Many noble families would pay well to own such a unique gladiator. The word own made Jake's stomach turn. They were talking about selling him like property. An excellent idea, said the white-skinned council member. I myself would be interested in purchasing this creature. It would make an amusing addition to my private arena. Other council members began making their own offers. They talked about Jake as if he wasn't standing right there, discussing what tricks they could teach him and what opponents would be most entertaining to watch him fight. Jake looked around the chamber and saw guards at every exit. There was no escape. In a few minutes, his ownership would be decided by whoever could pay the most. Then he heard footsteps behind him. Someone else was entering the chamber, but Jake couldn't turn around to see who it was because of his chains. I demand the right to speak, a voice called out. Jake's heart jumped. It was Lyra. The council members looked surprised. Healers were not usually allowed in their meetings, especially not young ones like Lyra. You forget your place, child, said the ancient council member. This matter does not concern you. But Lyra walked right into the center of the circle, next to Jake. Her crystal face was set with determination, though Jake could see her hand shaking slightly. It does concern me, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. According to the old laws, I have the right to claim ownership of any research subject that I have been studying. The council members looked at each other in confusion. Research subject? Asked one of them. Lyra reached into her bag and pulled out a datapad covered with notes and drawings. For the past 5 days, I have been documenting the physical and mental capabilities of this human. My research shows that humans possess unique qualities that we have never encountered before. She held up the datapad so the council could see her work. Look at these healing rates. Look at his pain tolerance. Look at his ability to adapt his fighting style during combat. This creature is not just another gladiator. He is a scientific discovery. The ancient council member leaned forward in her chair. What exactly are you claiming? Lyra took a deep breath and pointed directly at Jake. When she spoke, her voice was clear and strong without any doubt. He belongs to me. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Council members shouted at each other while guards moved closer to Jake and Lyra. The noise was so loud that Jake could barely think. Finally, the ancient council member raised her hand for silence. Explain yourself, young healer. By what right do you make this claim? By the law of scientific protection, Lyra replied. Any researcher who has been studying a subject for more than 3 days can claim ownership to continue their work. I have been documenting this human's abilities since his arrival. My research is not complete. The council members whispered among themselves. Jake could see that some of them looked angry, but others seemed curious about Lyra's research. "Show us your findings," ordered the Ancient One. Lyra activated her datapad, and images appeared in the air above it. Jake saw detailed drawings of human anatomy, charts showing his recovery times, and notes about his fighting techniques. She had been studying him much more carefully than he had realized. "Humans are different from any species we have encountered," Lyra explained. "They do not have our strength or our natural armor, but they have something else. They refuse to give up. They find new solutions when old ones fail. They sacrifice themselves to protect others, even strangers." She gestured toward Jake. "This human came to our world not to conquer, but to rescue others of his kind. When captured, he did not beg for mercy or try to bargain for his life. Instead, he prepared to face impossible odds. These are qualities worth studying." The ancient council member stared at Lyra for a long moment. "And what would you do with your research subject?" "Continue to study him. Learn from him. Perhaps teach our own people that strength comes in many forms." The chamber was silent except for the humming of the crystal walls. Jake held his breath, waiting for the council's decision. His life now depended on whether they would honor their own ancient laws. "The law of scientific protection is valid," the ancient council member finally said. "The healer's claim is legal. The human belongs to her." Jake felt relief wash over him, but he also saw the angry looks on the faces of some council members. They were not happy about losing their valuable prize. As guards led them out of the chamber, Jake whispered to Lyra, "Thank you. You saved my life." She looked at him with serious eyes. "I did not save it.
I only bought us time."
Now we must figure out what to do with it." 3 weeks passed after Lyra's declaration to the High Council. Jake was moved to a better cell in the research section of the prison complex. Instead of gray paste, he received real food. Instead of being forced to train for fights, he spent his days answering Lyra's questions about human culture and abilities. But Jake knew this arrangement wouldn't last forever. He could see the angry looks from guards who thought Lyra was being too soft with her research subject. Other Zephyrian nobles kept asking when they could see the human fight again. The pressure was building. During one of their research sessions, Lyra showed Jake something that changed everything. "Look at this," she said, holding up her datapad. On the screen was a message from the High Council. "They have given me 1 month to complete my research. After that, you will be returned to the arena for public fights." Jake's heart sank. "How much time do we have left?" 1 week. That night, Jake lay in his cell thinking about his options. He could try to escape alone, but the chances of success were almost zero. The prison complex was heavily guarded, and he didn't know the layout well enough to find a way out. But what if he didn't have to escape alone? The next day, Jake asked Lyra to take him to visit other prisoners in the research section. She was confused but agreed. As they walked through the corridors, Jake studied the security systems and guard routines. He also talked to other prisoners. Many of them had been there for years, giving up hope of ever seeing their homeworlds again. But when Jake told them about his plan, something changed in their eyes. Hope began to return. "You really think we can get out of here?" asked Rex, a lizard-like alien who had been captured 2 years earlier. "Not just get out," Jake said. "Get out together and make sure they can't easily capture others like us." Word of Jake's plan spread quietly through the prison levels. Prisoners who had barely spoken to each other before began working together. The giant insect creature from the lower levels agreed to help. So did the flying aliens from the high security wing. Even some of the more dangerous prisoners wanted to join. Lyra was nervous about the plan. "If we're caught, they will execute all of us," she warned. "If we do nothing, they'll kill us slowly in the arena anyway," Jake replied. "At least this way we have a chance. But I am Zephyrian. I could have a normal life if I just forget about you and continue my work." Jake looked at her seriously. "Is that what you want? To pretend you never learned that your people are wrong about strength and honor?" Lyra was quiet for a long time. Finally, she shook her head. "No, I want to help you." "All of you." The plan was simple but dangerous. During the shift change at midnight, when there were fewer guards, the prisoners would break out of their cells simultaneously. Lyra would disable the security systems from the medical center, where she had access to the main computer. Jake would lead the prisoners to the hangar where the transport ships were kept. The hardest part would be getting past the arena guards, who were the toughest fighters in the complex. But Jake had an idea for that too. On the night of the escape, everything started according to plan. Lyra used her medical access codes to shut down the alarm systems and unlock the cell doors. Prisoners throughout the complex began moving toward their assigned meeting points. Jake led the largest group through the main corridor toward the hangar. They moved quietly, avoiding the guard patrols that Lyra had mapped out for them. But when they reached the arena level, they ran into trouble. Arena Master Thax was waiting for them with 20 guards. "Did you really think we wouldn't notice your little meetings?" Thax laughed. "We have been watching you for days." The prisoners were trapped. Guards blocked both ends of the corridor and there was no other way to reach the hangar. "Surrender now and I will only execute half of you," Thax offered. Jake stepped forward. "I have a better idea. You and me, one-on-one. If I win, you let everyone go. If you win, we all surrender." Thax looked interested. "You want to fight me? I am twice the size of Gorvek. Those are my terms." The guards formed a circle in the corridor. Thax picked up a massive sword from one of his soldiers. Jake found a metal pipe that had been torn from the wall during their escape. The fight was brutal. Thax was everything he claimed to be. Bigger, stronger, and more experienced than Gorvek had been. But Jake had learned something important during his weeks in prison. He had learned to think like the aliens he was fighting. Instead of trying to match Thax's strength, Jake used the corridor's narrow space against him. The arena master's huge sword couldn't swing properly in the tight area. Jake stayed close, using his pipe to block and strike at weak points in Thax's armor. The fight lasted 15 minutes. Both fighters were bleeding and exhausted when Jake finally found his opening. Thax overextended himself trying to land a finishing blow, and Jake used the arena master's own momentum to drive him into the wall. Thax fell and did not get up. The guards stared in shock. Their leader, the most feared fighter in the complex, had been defeated by the same small human who had killed Gorvek. "You gave your word," Jake said to the guards. "Honor it." To Jake's surprise, they did. Zephyrian culture valued strength above all else, and Jake had proven his strength twice now. The guards stepped aside and let the prisoners pass. In the hangar, Lyra was waiting with 3 transport ships ready for launch. "Hurry," she called. "Reinforcements will be here soon." The prisoners divided into 3 groups and boarded the ships. Jake made sure that Kate and the other humans were safe before taking his place in the lead ship with Lyra. As they lifted off from the prison complex, Jake looked back at the crystal buildings getting smaller below them. Somewhere down there, other prisoners were still trapped, but word of their escape would spread. Other worlds would learn that the Zephyrian Empire could be beaten. "Where do we go now?" Lyra asked from the pilot's seat. Jake thought about it. They needed somewhere safe, but they also needed somewhere they could help other escaped prisoners and refugees. "I know a place," he said. "There's an abandoned mining station in the frontier zone. No government claims it, but it's got good defenses and room for a lot of people." Over the next few months, the mining station became something special. Escaped prisoners from dozens of worlds made their way there. Jake and Lyra worked together to turn it into a safe haven where different species could live and work together. Lyra's research on human abilities became the foundation for new ideas about cooperation and strength. She taught other species that survival wasn't about being the strongest individual, but about working together and never giving up. Jake trained volunteers in tactics and strategy, showing them how smaller forces could defeat larger ones through planning and teamwork. But more importantly, he taught them that real strength came from protecting others, not from dominating them. Word of their safe haven reached Earth, and the human government sent supplies and support. Other species began to follow their example, standing up to the Zephyrian Empire's expansion. One evening, as Jake and Lyra watched the sunset from the station's observation deck, she asked him something that had been on her mind. "Do you ever regret what happened? If you hadn't been captured, you might be home with your own people now." Jake thought about it seriously. "I regret that people died. I regret that it took a war to bring us together. But I don't regret meeting you or learning what we could accomplish together." Lyra smiled. "When I first pointed at you and said you belonged to me, I thought I was just saving your life. What do you think now?" "Now I think we belong to each other, and to everyone else who believes that strength means protecting the weak instead of crushing them." Jake nodded. In the distance, another ship was arriving with more refugees seeking safety. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, more people to help, and more challenges to face. But tonight he was content to stand with his friend and partner. watching the stars and knowing that sometimes the best victories were the ones that made everyone stronger. The young human warrior had found something worth fighting for, and the Zephyrian healer who had claimed him had found something worth believing in. Together they had started something that would change the galaxy. The title of their story had become true in ways neither of them had expected. She had proudly proclaimed he belonged to her, and in doing so had declared that some things were worth standing up for no matter the cost.